the thing was, I went into accounting because it was safe. I went into accounting because I needed a job,
Mm.
and I knew that I had a feeling I would be really good at it, and I was. And I was afraid that if I went into fashion, I wouldn't be good enough. There would be competition. Somebody would sew straighter lines. Somebody would have more creative ideas. It was more competitive. But I always wonder what would have happened if I had gone that route. And when I turned 50, I said, you know what? Why not find out? Why not find out the what if? Why not find out what would have happened had I pursued something that I really loved?
Welcome to Reward, the podcast of The Trust. We are the show specifically for women entrepreneurs who want to build businesses into the multi-million-dollar revenues and beyond, but especially because we know the reward is much greater than that. I'm Allie Brown, and I'm excited to introduce you to these diverse female leaders from a variety of industries, women making huge impact and who are unwilling to settle for the status quo. On the web, visit jointhetrust.org to learn more about our modern community for forward-thinking 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs. That's jointhetrust.org. See you there. Now, get ready to enjoy this episode's powerful conversation. Susanne Mariga, hello.
Hi, Allie. Glad to be here.
It's so good to have you back with me, and this conversation is going to be so juicy because you have gone through not only like one reinvention, but I feel even a few over the last few years, and really just stepped into a place of like this creativity and exploration. And so, I know many people though only know you a bit from your past and from your left-brained ventures. So I want to know if we could kind of go back and start with your journey into being a CPA and everything you created from there. Can we go back for the people who especially aren't familiar with you?
Absolutely. So I have been a CPA I stopped counting. After you're 20, it's just not cool anymore. So you just stop counting those decades that passed by. And, I went into accounting. It was an amazing career. Was one of the few people out there that passed their CPA exam the first time. Like, I think that back then they said like 4% in the country did that. Went to work for one of the top firms. And when I had my daughter, decided to go out on my own, and we created, what was meant to be a small business doing a few tax returns and some bookkeeping clients, end up having government contracts with some of the largest cities in the country, and end up having a very big practice from an accounting and tax perspective, ended up becoming a Goldman Sachs 10,000 in that program, and went ahead and sold it actually in 2022 at the end of the year. I ended up selling it. It was interesting. I wasn't planning on selling it. I had met a broker many, many years ago who we just kind of kept in touch. And he happened to call me one summer, and I was looking for a new tax manager and was feeling the pain of recruiting immediately post COVID. And I said, okay, I'll list my business for kicks and giggles just to see what type of price it lands. And literally we put it out there. Within 2 weeks, we had 4 offers. And I said, it's a sign from God. It's time to, instead of hiring that tax manager, maybe it's time to replace myself. And that started with really this brand new reinvention and figuring out what happens now.
Yeah. I don't want to skip over though. You did a lot of work. Your authorship really gave your firm a lot of promotion, right? When you wrote your book, and it was Profit First for Minority. Would you tell me the title exactly again?
Yeah, it's Profit First for Minority Business Enterprises is the book that I wrote. It's part of the Profit First family with Mike Michalowicz. And it's a great book. It definitely talks about profit first, but I think it talks more about issues that minority entrepreneurs go through, and really goes toward, the importance of having profitable businesses in our communities. And it ended up being, as Kirkus reviewed, it ended up being a Publishers Weekly's um, pick. And definitely, I still get emails to this day. I still get tagged on social media that it has changed many people's lives.
I love that. And it's still such a relevant theme because it's just still blows my mind. You still see so few people talking about profit in a business. And it seems even worse now. Everything is surface. Everything's about revenues. Everything's about your bragging rights. It's this illusion of success. And I do think we're at a tipping point right now with the I've been saying this for years, though. I keep feeling like, okay, it can't get more weirder than now. And the social media saturation and people just talking about the optics of their business versus, you know, having a solid, steady business that you quietly make a lot of money from is awesome. Like, you don't need to have these huge revenues that you can just brag about. Or we all know that there's milestones and exciting things about revenues. But could you just riff for a minute kind of on the whole profit theme and why that is so important? Because I think the more women I've worked with over the years, it's become almost a place that like they have to give themselves permission to shift their focus in the business to that model versus maybe what they've learned from all the flashy mentors and programs and stuff out there.
And that is so true. And it's interesting too, Allie, because when we first came on, you were talking about pivots. And, one of the things that occurred to me is I feel like I pivot every single decade of my life. You turn 40, I just turned 50 a few months ago. And I feel like when I was turning 40, I went through a significant pivot. Um, I signed up for the MS 150 for you guys that are not in Texas. That's that bike ride that you ride your bike literally all the way from Houston to Austin. It's like a 2-day bike ride. You're road biking, you're out there, anybody can hit you in the back and you practice, right? You don't wake up one morning and you decide I'm going to ride my bike 100 miles. You're literally practicing on these country roads for almost a year. And I remember when I first started the MS 150, I said, okay, I'm going to lose some weight. But I was also thinking to myself, it'd just be nice just to have time on the road, right? Just to have time by myself. And I was the caboose. So I was like not the fastest bike rider. I was always the last one. I was almost like the grandma, making sure everybody like made it safe. They didn't want to say that I was just slow. I was looking out to make sure the guest arrived at the destination. But really,
Yes.
I was just the slowest one.
You're like guest services in the
Exactly.
back.
Exactly. I was guest services. I was the caboose of the bike train. And, part of me realized that I was riding this ride because I was at such a low point in my life where I felt like I was doing everything for everyone else, right? There's that push that you have to make all your employees happy, your team happy, and that's important. I was trying to balance my young children at the time. I'm carrying a lot of the weight and my personal family relationship. And I felt like everything I was doing, I was really about pleasing everyone else, making sure that we deliver amazing service at the lowest price for the company. And really it put you in the state of like this low grade depression is what I'll call it. And it was interesting because that year that I pivoted and I crossed over that 39 to 40 mark, I said, you know what? I'm done with this. I am done with this, you know, serving everyone else and getting the leftovers and thinking I needed to be satisfied with that. Because I think as young girls, we're always taught to be nice, think about others, self-sacrifice. And that year that I turned 40, I found Profit First. I crossed over into Mike McAllowett's book and I was like, oh my gosh, I need this, but not just me. Every single one of my clients need this because I'm growing revenue, but I'm not seeing any results as a result of that. It's not making me happier. And it ended up being a significant change for us. I mean, it, made me a personal millionaire implementing Profit First, a cash millionaire versus just having, business shares and stocks. And it allowed me to grow the firm that I wanted even more, like hire the best and brightest, bring on those tax managers that really allowed me to step out of my business more and create a business that I could sell. So, that was the first pivot that happened. So like, I would say like every decade there's been a significant pivot. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the pivot of my 50s too at some point.
Yes, for sure. And what's interesting is I wanted to bring that up because that chapter gave you the power to create this chapter. And I just wanted to make sure everyone follows those dots because one thing will often lead to the other. And you being able to create such a successful firm that was so profitable, right, has now powered you up in a rare place for so many women that you can now pretty much create anything you want. It is so exciting. So let's, yay. Okay, this is the big reveal. Okay, so you need to tell the story. I'm not going to tell the story, but what, after you sold your firm, which is another dream come true, right? And everyone, thinks about that. What will that feel like? Will you, go off and want to live on an island for a month? Do you feel like you're missing your business? I've heard so many different responses to that from women who've sold their companies. What was that like after you sold the firm, and lead me up to today?
I think the first thing that hit me was a severe identity crisis. I mean, my whole life, practically at that point, was being someone that solved everyone's problems, being that numbers girl, being that person that could finish up a tax return really fast and really accurate and really amazing. And suddenly I was like, who am I? What happens now? Right. And, luckily I was able to step into the fractional CFO role. I'd done that as in the CPA firm, but really go after helping businesses change their processes, implement profit first, and really start to get their dreams on that side. But there was a significant identity crisis. And Allie, I remember you and I working on that and you going, what happens now? Like literally, I felt like the Evita movie. What happens now? That I sold that business. And I think that was the first major shift that happened to me when I first sold the business. That was the emotion of what happens now, and that need to aggressively, quickly rebuild what I had created before.
Okay, so tell me about the first glimpses of your new creative chapter.
So this pivot, it's interesting that how it happened. Like I said, every decade I do a pivot. And my son, he is 15 and my daughter is 18. And for years, my daughter was lucky because when I started my business, she was there. So she went through the lean years, the poverty years. We couldn't afford daycare. So she went with me to every business meeting, and she got to see this business build. And by the time he came around, it was I mean, we had HISD, the Houston Public School Systems for clients, and he had nannies at that point, so he had a completely different experience. And
Mm.
it and I remember he was telling me, he goes, "Mom, Florence gets to go with you to New York all the time. She comes back with all these playbills. She gets to like have all this fun." And he goes, "I never get to travel with you." And so I remember like feeling that mommy guilt, like, yeah, he's kind of right. I don't have any excuses anymore that he's not going. And so I said, okay, you're going to come with me to my next New York trip. And we're going to make it a fun trip just as much as the one that Florence experiences. So of course, to make it educational, I said, we're going to, go visit the 9/11 memorial. We're going to go to the 9/11 museum. We're going to go to the Statue of Liberty. We're going to see all these Broadway shows. And I remember we were on this tugboat. It felt like a tugboat. And we were on our way to the Statue of Liberty. And we were sitting there. It was a hot summer. It was so hot. And I remember there was this lady sitting across from me. And I don't even remember what this lady looked like. I just remember she had brown hair, she had dark glasses, but she had this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful like bag. It was this hobo bag. It was like this, it probably used to be a dark brown bag, but it had faded over the years. So you could see like the little white etching, they call it the patina, where it had faded. And this bag just told her whole life story. Like you look at this bag, you go, I bet you carried this bag the day that your husband proposed to you. I bet you brought it to the hospital when you had your daughter. I bet you had it with you when you went to dinner and your husband said, I'm getting a divorce from you. I bet you had this bag your whole life. It just told her this whole story. And I thought to myself, I just want that bag. I want that bag so bad I will buy it off of you. And of course, being an accountant, part of me is shy, right? We're a little bit introverted. I did not have the gumption to ask her, what brand is that? What brand of a bag is that? I know it's probably from like the 1970s, but and I think I must have been staring. And as soon as the boat docked, this lady runs away. Like I cannot find her. I'm like looking for this lady because I finally have the courage to go, what is that brand of the bag? Can I just touch the bag, smell the bag? I just want to hold this bag. But she's gone. And so of course I finished the mommy duties. We see the Statue of Liberty, and I tell my son, I said, okay, we need to go back to Fifth Avenue. And he's like, Mom, we were there yesterday. And I'm like, no, we need to go back to Fifth Avenue. There's something important that I need to get at Fifth Avenue. And so I take him for another torture round. I'm going to all these stores on Fifth Avenue, Bird Art,
He didn't know what he
bag.
signed up for.
And I'm
he
like, it's
thought it,
something
he
really
thought it would be the
new.
cool New York trip. You're dragging him around into bag stores,
This is our work, right? These
right?
bags.
Right. Well, he
Um,
wanted to come, so
exactly. This is what we do. This is what we do in New York. And like, I could not find this bag. As soon as we land in
you were
Houston,
even looking for something like this bag. You're like, you just kind of knew, like, that's the kind of bag that I actually really want. That's a good investment piece. You actually started looking around for something like that.
exactly. I
Okay.
wanted that lifetime bag, right? I wanted that lifetime bag. As soon as we got back to Houston, I went to Memorial City, couldn't find the bag. Went down to the Galleria, which you guys are not from Texas. That is like the mall to go to. Could not find the bag. Ended up buying a Louis Vuitton hobo, but was not the same as that bag. Lovely bag, but not as the same as that bag. And I just felt like something was missing in that bag, right? I even went back to New York again, could not find the bag. And finally I said, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to make the bag. I am just going to make the bag. I'm going to figure out how to make this bag. And so as I was making this bag, I was thinking to myself, every woman in America needs to have this bag. It should not be that hard to find these soft hobo bags. And so needless to say, I've gone around the world, right? That was one of my things when I turned 50 at 49. I said, I'm going to travel around the world looking for the bag and decided I was going to make the bag. And so, Allie, I've been making the bag ever since.
So how did that start? How did you say, you know what, I'm going to, because I'm thinking I wouldn't even know how to do that. Just to sew something, I know you can buy a pattern or, you can probably figure it out, but like leathers and buying leather and then finding a factory to make it. And I mean, did this start off as actually you making it for yourself, or you decided that you wanted to, I think I'm going to start a whole new venture and this is going to be a new business for me?
So I had grown up sewing, and that's something that very few people realize. And it was interesting because when I actually went into accounting, I did not start out as an accounting major. I actually went to my undergraduate degree at Ohio State was actually biochemistry. And people were shocked. They're like, it was biochemistry? Like you, I said, yeah, I took like 3 levels of calculus, physics, organic chemistry, microbiology, all that stuff. And it was interesting because my third year, my junior year, I said, I'm going to take some classes to see what my rest of my life is going to look like. Cause, I got pretty good grades. I can memorize things. I can do the math, but I've never worked in a hospital. I've never seen anybody bleed out except for myself. Let me just see what I'm going to be doing for the next 50 years of my life. And so I took this hematology class, which hematology is the study of blood, right? And it's part of the allied med curriculum. And we were learning to draw blood on each other in the class. And I remember like I was the person in the class that nobody wanted me to draw blood. I was the person that, let's just get this over with. Let's
You're
put
like,
the
she's
needle
going to kill me.
in.
She doesn't
And
know what she's
like,
doing.
you had this big old like purple like mark on your arm for like a whole week after I was done with you. And so like when the teacher said pair up, I was always the one like, hello.
Yeah.
And everybody was like running from me. And I remember like we had to do a rotation in a hospital. And this nice looking football player came in. I mean, this guy was buff. You couldn't miss his veins. I mean, like they were like muscles. I mean, like they just popped out. I mean, you had to be blind to miss these veins. And I remember putting a tourniquet on his arm and which made him even bigger. And I remember prepping the needle and I remember putting the needle on his arm and like no blood came out. Like Allie, I had went through the vein into the arm and no blood was coming out. And he's sitting there looking at me and I'm looking at him like, why is blood not coming out? And the nurse says, excuse me, just move over. And of course, then she saves the day. She gets the blood out. And she goes, you're not going to do this anymore today. And she ties a tourniquet onto like one of those, like, you remember college, they have like the little chairs at the desk part of it. And she draws a little circle. You're going to practice here on this rubber band. for the rest of
Yeah.
your duration here.
Oh gosh.
And I remember I went home and I was crying and I was talking to my dad and I said, I can't do this anymore. Every morning the instructor tells us to eat a good breakfast and it just starts a panic attack for the next day for me. And he's like, you're almost done. You're a junior. You're about to go to medical school. Just finish this up. And I said, I cannot do this. I'd rather die than do this. And, and that was like, again, what do you do now? I think, again, about 20, that 10-year decade, right? Pivot. And, part of me is like, I can go into accounting because I had done accounting before. I worked for my dad and his accounting firm growing up. Great tax write off, by the way, guys. I could, my accounting instructor I had in high school, I was like teacher's pet. I could do accounting. Something tells me I would be really good at it. Or I could do fashion design. And the reason why I said fashion design was because, growing up, my mom used to make a lot of my dresses. She had that old green Singer sewing machine.
Yeah.
And we would just spend hours in the fabric stores. I remember just like
I remember
loving.
going with my mom and you would flip through the book of patterns, right? And look at the dresses and um that was I just remember having such great memories around that.
My favorite was the Vogue one, right? The Vogue magazine where it actually cost like probably like $100 to make the thing, right? But it was still better than $1,000 you would have paid to buy it. And I hated the Kmart shopping. Like, oh my gosh, Kmart was like the neighborhood store. And I was like, I'd rather make my own clothes than do the Kmart shopping. So I actually made my own prom dress. I made a lot of my clothes in high school. I remember I made this like beautiful like red sundress in college. I took my mom's curtains that she was going to make and I like made a sundress instead. And I remember like leaving class and going to the McDonald's down the street and standing in line and this man runs up to me for Rose and he's like, I just want to give it to you because you are so beautiful. And I'm like, I'm telling you, a dress can stop traffic, the right dress when you make it. So I had the skill set and I liked it. But the thing was, I went into accounting because it was safe. I went into accounting because I needed a job
Mm.
and I knew that I had a feeling I would be really good at it. And I was. And I was afraid that if I went into fashion, I wouldn't be good enough. There would be competition. Somebody would sew straighter lines. Somebody would have more creative ideas. It was more competitive. And so
Ooh,
I
there's
chose
more
to go job.
variables
Yeah,
in fashion. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah,
And the accounting you could control.
exactly, exactly. But I always wonder what would have happened if I had gone that route. Like, what would have happened? And I'm glad that I did. I did really well in accounting, but I always just wondered, what would have happened on the other side? And when I turned 50, I said, you know what? Why not find out? Why not find out the what if? Why not find out what would have happened had I pursued something that I really loved? Because I loved
Mm.
accounting and I also loved fashion just as much. And I was just craving that chance, that opportunity to be creative, to create something. And I've always been intrigued by manufacturing. I've always been intrigued by the idea of making widgets and out of nothing. And I was like, let me just do this.
So what was the first step?
So it's interesting. And, I know there are people that love business plans and they love, I remember when I started my accounting firm, my husband was like, if you're going to do this, make a business plan. And I remember making this business plan and in the business plan, I was going to have a mobile accounting service. I was going to drive to people's houses and do their tax returns and
Hmm.
charge a really low price. And I remember taking my business plan to the SBA because they used to have advisors at the SBA that would give you free
Yeah.
advice. And the guy literally looked at me. He goes, you are going to end up on the Channel 11 news dead if you follow this plan. And I went home and I told my husband, the guy said I was going to end up dead if I followed this business plan. And he goes, okay, well, make another one. Well, I just never made another one again. And what I did was I just took one step at a time. And as doors opened and we did a good job, I took the next step. And
Mhm.
and how I approached this was I literally started with one step. I took a leather making a handbag making course in New York, learned how to make leather handbags there. Went I One of the things that was one of my goals is I asked myself when I was 49, I said, what would be the thing that I would regret doing or not doing if I would die today? Because reality is, when you turn 50, you've got more years behind you than you have ahead of you. What will make me go, darn, I wish I wasn't dead today if I died? And it came down to two things. One is not seeing the world. I wanted to travel the world and see the world. And two is not pursuing my dream of fashion. And
Mm.
so I decided that I was going to do it. I was just going to do the thing. And so I traveled the world. By the way, I still did not see that bag. I did not see the bag in Italy. I did not see the bag in France. I did not see the bag in Spain. I did not see the bag in China. I didn't even in Japan. I did not see the bag. The bag did not exist anywhere. Um, but what it did was it gave me the opportunity to start to meet people that were really masters at what they did. When I went to China, one of my things of going to China was I always had questions. My dad is Chinese, my mom is African American. And being my dad being from China, I never really got to see his family. I saw my grandparents when they came down, but I never got to explore and see them. And, one of the things that I got to do when I went to China was I got to meet my family for the very first time. I got to meet his sisters, his brother. I got to see where my grandfather grew up. And I got to like meet a whole lot of people, and I got to meet people that were masters at their craft, that made handbags like the most beautiful handbags I had ever seen. And, I got to go when I went to Italy, I got to go to the School of Leather in Florence, Italy. And again, meeting more masters at their crafts. And really, I think one of the things that you learn as you build multiple businesses is, you learn at some point you can't do it all yourself. And and I think that's what makes this business different than the other ones is I'm starting out of the box realizing that. And I'm starting out of the box realizing early on for my other businesses that if you want to go fast and you want to go powerful, you just bring people in that are masters at their craft. And so we're starting off with hiring people that are masters at their craft.
Do you want to talk about the brand and now, what this is when you're about to launch this and announce this to the world? Let's talk about the company and the brand and the offerings.
Sure. So our name of our brand is Florel, Florel, Florel. And it's interesting because it's named after my kids. My daughter is Florence. My son is Emmanuel. So you take the first of Florence and end with Emmanuel. Emmanuel's a little upset because he's like, "Why does it have to end with me?" And I'm like, "Well, Florence is the one that offered names. You didn't offer names, so it's Florel." Um,
Mhm.
and so the company is called Florel. And, we're actually launching our first bag as the silhouette. It's a cognac silhouette. So think of brandy, that kind of, that wine, that liquor that you drink. It's a beautiful, very light brown, tan cognac color. And I love it. One of the great things about being a designer is you get to wear your inventory. And it's kind of bad because like, it's kind of like an addict now, an addict in the store, like if I have a craving for a purse, I just make it, which
Mhm.
is really, really dangerous
Right.
at this particular point. And it's become one of my favorite bags, just how it hangs, the quality of the leather. I even love smelling it. It just smells so like leather, the way that leather smells. And trust me, I have smelled a lot of leather, and some leathers just do not smell good. But this leather, like these bags, leather smell really good.
Mhm.
And that one's launching first, so I'm really excited for that one, and it should be here, hopefully in the next week or so.
Oh my gosh. I want to back up for a second though. How did you know where to go in Italy? I mean, it'd be fun to go and explore and find that, but like, I'd love if you could just break down a few of the steps on how you even found these resources. Because this is just such a sharp turn from what you were doing before.
And I think it helps too, having been a fractional CFO, so I've worked a lot in manufacturing, so I know a lot of
Mm,
connections from that stuff, been in New York
yeah.
Fashion Week, that type of thing, sat across from Miss America, on the walkway, the catwalk, so I've seen a lot of it, so that helps a bit. I also think just research too, just researching, where do you learn how to work with leather? Where do you take courses on that? That really helped. We were going to Europe anyway that summer. And so, my daughter, her name is Florence, and she really wanted to go to Florence, Italy. And I'm like, well, the School of Leather's there. We can go see that.
School
Um,
of Leather.
the Scuola, yeah, Scuola de Cuoio,
Wow.
I think is what it's called.
Wow. And what do you
Yeah,
learn at School of Leather?
School of Leather.
What do you learn there?
Well, it's actually a college where they actually teach people how to make leather goods. So
Wow.
that's really neat there.
And did you go there, or like did you take a class there, or you just went to visit?
I went to visit. I went to visit.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I did some
So
things in
you
New York, but not
okay.
actually, but I actually went to visit there. So that was pretty neat.
Okay. So walk us through the steps though of like, you found the providers in Italy. Did you go like feel the leathers and pick out the exact colors you wanted? Like how does that work?
Yeah, because that's one of the things, like when you're working remotely, and they send you photo shoots, you start to learn quickly that the camera on the phones doesn't necessarily produce good quality. And you're like, is that the right color? And of course your person's gonna be like, oh yeah, that's the right color because they want you to make a decision quickly and put that order in, right? But really, you really don't actually went to China twice last year. Um, so I'm very much hands-on. I was looking at my United miles, and it was like you had like 284,000 miles like last year. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm like 1K now. Um, and so I did spend a lot of time traveling. And there's nothing like actually going in and one meeting your people that you're working with too, because it's a relationship. It's all about the relationship and
Mhm.
them knowing you versus you being some random person that's emailing them. I went in there and felt the leathers because, one of the things that I learned is people call PU polyurethane leather. And I was like, I do not want a polyurethane purse. I remember one of the first samples that we ordered, I had asked for a leather bag and they had sent pictures of it. And I'm like, that's not a leather bag, but of course they're like, oh yes it is, yes it is. And I received this bag and it smells like plastic, like you could get
This
high
was
on
from
the
China.
bag. Yeah,
This is in China. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And so, and so really, going there, feeling the leather, smelling the leathers, getting to know the tanneries, is a very important step too, in terms of making sure, because, there's, when you're doing manufacture, there's an MOQ, minimum order quantity, that you have to produce, for it to be worth that for the factories. And so
Mhm.
knowing that, you want to make sure you get it right, right? Because the more wrong versions you get it, the longer it's going to take for you to get into production.
Mhm. Okay. And so well, I want to say we were so honored to be able to get a sneak peek at a few of your samples that I was disappointed. I thought I was taking one home, but I think you had to pry it out of my hands. But it was so exciting, especially for those of us who have had a service-based business for so long, right? It's kind of like, we kind of jokingly sell air. It's like, what do we really have a business on versus a bag where it's a tangible product and we're touching it and feeling it and smelling it and going, woo, and like, what if the strap was a little longer? What if this was different? What if, it's so fun and creative that I could tell like we were all kind of envious, I think, of this chapter for you. And it just seems it seems glamorous. I know it's a lot of work, but it does seem kind of glamorous. So um, I'm very excited for my bag, which I'm going to keep reminding you that you promised me one and I will get it at some point because I thought I was taking it home. I'm just joking. I know that I'll get one eventually. So we got to see the samples. How you seemed a little not nervous, but I know you were like, oh, wow, this is the moment. Like, real people, real women now are going to see these bags. What is that like when you create something artistic and then ask for feedback or, criticism or, I mean, that's a whole new process for you.
It is. It is. And Allie, I'll be honest with you, I almost like didn't get on a plane like that day. I was like, maybe I'll just call Erica and be like, my throat is really hurting. I can't
Yeah.
make it today because it is your baby. It's something that, I worked on for like a year to perfect this bag. We actually the one that you fell in love with, it took us 4 tries to get that bag right. Like literally the first one came back too hard, too big. The next one came back right shape, but too small. Next one came back a triangle. I'm like, where did they get triangle? Oh, my drawing. it does look like a triangle. And then finally the fourth one, we're like, yeah, this is the bag. This is the bag I saw on the boat in New York City. This is the bag, and even better than the
Hmm.
bag. And it was such a compliment. I think one of the ladies in the trust said, this is what I wish Louis Vuitton would make, and so I was like, yes, yes, yes. So feedback is really valuable, but it is nerve wracking, because it's like, what if they don't like the bag? But again, it's good because, and that's one thing I liked about the trust is that you're able to get feedback from people that would buy that quality bag.
Hmm.
And it's better to get the feedback and get negative feedback than to manufacture 1,000 of them and not be able to sell them. So
That's true.
that advice was actually very, very valuable that I got. And I'm glad you guys like the bag.
Uh,
But still, so you have to show it at some point, but it's still very, it's still very hard. It's very hard. And I think part of it's hard because identity too. I think people associate me like you said, Allie, with being left brain, being that numbers person, even though it does take geometry to create patterns. It really does. To get the angles right, to get it to droop right. It's actually geometry, but people don't realize that. They're like, she's not going to do a good job. She's a numbers person. But, and even that's still a battle, like, how is the world going to see me? Are they going to be able to see me as being able to do both? Or are they going to see me as,
mm,
you know, did Suzanne just flip out and just have like a moment when she turned 50? Like, how is the world going to see me?
hmm I'm flashing back to when I was living in New York or like kind of transitioning out of New York, I watched a lot of Sex in the City back then because those episodes were hysterical and mostly about the girls' friendships and and things they did. And there was one episode that one of their friends got divorced and like went off the deep end and started making bags. And if you remember, you should go back and watch that episode. I don't know which one it was, but it was so funny that she had like it was kind of part of her mental breakdown is that she now suddenly was designing bags and they were awful, but she invited all of her friends over. They thought they were coming over to like help her recover from the divorce and she was selling all these awful bags. Anyway, so yeah, it is kind of funny when you mentioned that. I thought of that this is not it's not like it's funny because I think a lot of us have these secret creative different careers that we would love or we explored or that we suppressed when we were younger. And, some people could view it as the midlife crisis career, the next turn, the next chapter. But we are the first generation really to have this privilege of being able to continually reinvent ourselves like we do. And so this is one of the reasons I love your story so much is that, you felt you went all out with what you did before. Like you did it and sealed that chapter. And now, you're creating this whole new thing. And that's why I love this story so much and I can't wait to see more of it unfold. Where can everyone listening go learn more about you and the bags and tell them what to do?
So to learn more about the bags, if you go to florel.com, Florel.com, you'll definitely learn more about the bags there. And then for me, if you go to profitmap.co, you can learn more about me, learn more about my book, and learn about implementing profit first if that's something that you're interested in for your business.
Perfect. And then can you tell me, you've been a part of my communities for many years now, and I've been just so honored. And the last several years have been part of the trust. We've done some coaching together as well. Would you mind sharing? I know you've been part of many groups, and been a part of a lot of great things out there. But you continue to be part of the trust, and I would love if you could share why.
So I think that a lot of times when you go into different networking rooms, there's a hoarding of information, right? It's a hoarding of, how do I fix this problem or helping somebody else? There's always this feeling of people holding back information. And it's not like that in a trust. In the trust, we freely share. If you're struggling with finances, I'm going to give you some advice. If you struggle with profitability, I'm going to give you some advice. If I'm struggling with marketing, we've got marketing experts that are going to give me advice. And it's authentic advice. It's things that they've gone through and cut their teeth on and learned. And there's really a genuine interest in wanting each other to succeed. So that just that authenticity, I think in that room is very important. It's not a shallow room where people are hoarding information and looking for just to grow their bottom line. It really is about collaboration and seeing each other grow.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for seeing that, and thank you for being a part of it, and we've been so honored to be part of this journey. I mean, the first to really witness this and see this is real. She hasn't just been talking about it, the one day, like here, you're like, here they are, the unboxing. Um, and in the scheme of all of this, Susanne, what is the reward for you?
I think the reward of being an entrepreneur and taking the risk is I get to live in the what ifs now, right? I get to live in the possibilities I feel that I'm lucky. I remember my first company and I remember it was slow grow. It was one client at a time, really knocking on doors and just doing a good job and then building a portfolio. And in this business, the third one, I'm able to let's do this. We know exactly how to do this now. We know how to manufacture. We know how to manage people. I don't have to take out a loan to do this. I get to self-finance it. And it's just a completely different experience. And to be able to live in the what if, to be able to live your dream versus putting everything on the line. I mean, it's just an amazing gift to be able to do that.
I love that. Thank you for being with us today. Good luck to you. And I can't wait to get my bag. I'm waiting. Okay. I'll be carrying it everywhere.
I can't wait to see you in a bag.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Subscribe now to the Reward Podcast to be sure to not miss an episode. And don't forget to visit jointhetrust.org to learn more about our modern community for forward-thinking 7- and 8-figure women entrepreneurs. You can learn more, apply to join us, or refer another woman you know who is over the $1 million mark and is ready for a different type of women's network. We have events coming up both live and online that are truly creating new possibilities for female leaders. That's jointhetrust.org. See you there.